Okay, today I'm going to show you how to do an oil and filter change on a JH Series 2 Holden Cruze Turbo Diesel. So this is a 2012 model. I'll just show you some of the differences. The earlier Holden Cruze Turbo Diesels had an engine by VM Motori, and the later ones had a GM 2-litre turbo diesel. The differences from the top of the engine, the VM Motori had the oil filler on the right hand side of the engine, whereas the GM diesel has it on the left hand side. So that's the key difference between the earlier turbo diesels and the later ones. So obviously we're doing this procedure on a GM turbo diesel. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just run through the parts and tools you're going to need to do the job. First of all, I'll just show you the car. So been out for a drive for about 15 minutes to get everything up to temperature. Come back, the car's in park, the handbrake's on, up on a bit of ramps, some ramps so I can get underneath the car. They're not proper car ramps, they're just caravan leveling ramps, but they do the job for me. I've also got the back wheels chocked, and I've just stuck some jack stands under there. If this thing rolls off the ramps, the last place you want to be is underneath it, because it's probably going to kill you. So make sure you take as many safety precautions as you can. Better off going for overkill than being under it when the thing rolls off the ramps. If you don't have any jack stands, just grab the spare tyre out of the boot and chuck that underneath the car. Okay, so in terms of parts and tools, obviously you're going to need oil. These things take 5.4 litres of oil when you're doing an oil and filter change. So for your first oil and filter change that you do with a car, just buy a 5-litre bottle and a 1-litre bottle. Mark the full mark on the 5-litre bottle with a texter. So for your subsequent oil changes, buy the 10-litre bulk drum and save yourself money. The 10-litre drum's also going to give you a spot to pour the waste oil into, and you can take that to places like Super Cheap Auto, and they've got big bins out the front of their shops where you can chuck your oil for it to be recycled. I'll talk a bit more about oil in a second. Oil filter. These cars use a cartridge type oil filter, and when you buy them, they obviously come with a rubber seal on the top there, and also in the pack you should have another seal which is for the filter housing, and you'll see that a bit later on. I'll talk a bit more about oil filters in a sec as well. That's a urethane sump plug washer. If you buy these from Holden, they charge you, $5 or $6 each for them. Buy them off eBay for less than $2. Always replace these when you change your oil. For such a cheap part, it's not worth the hassle of reusing the old one and having it fail. It's probably not likely to fail, but it's not worth taking the risk anyway. You'll need a service sticker to chuck on your window to remind you when to do your next oil change. A small flat screwdriver, that's just to help to get the seal out of the filter housing. You'll need a 15mm socket for the sump plug and a 32mm socket for the oil filter housing. You'll also need some nitrile gloves. Very handy to keep your hands clean. Makes clean up a lot easier. You just rip them off, chuck them in the bin, and your hands you've got no oil on your hands, so very good. Used oil probably isn't really a good thing to get on your hands and your skin anyway, so yeah, grab some gloves. You'll need a waste oil pan. It's got a 6-litre capacity. a funnel to refill, another little bucket over there which I use to chuck the filter housing in when I'm changing that, some degreaser, some paper towel and a rag, pair of old jocks. Hopefully there's no skids on them, but we're going to be wearing rubber gloves anyway, so we should be right. Okay, so I'll just talk a bit more about oil and the oil filter. Okay, with your oil, we're using a 5-weight 30 oil, which is specified by Holden for these engines. We're also using a fully synthetic oil. GMs use a specification called Dexos 2, so this is Dexos 2 approved. It also has what's specified for use in vehicles with diesel particulate filters, which the Holden Cruze has. So spend money on buying decent oil, don't buy the shit stuff. If you're going to be changing your oil yourself, you obviously care about your car. Yeah, so buy decent stuff. I use Newlon or Penrite in all my cars. Great Australian companies, produce awesome products, and yeah, as good as oil as you'll find anywhere. Holden specify 12 monthly or 15,000 kilometre oil changes for the Holden Cruze. I usually do mine every 6 months because I reckon 12 months is just too long. Getting onto the filters, I've got two different filters here. One's a premium filter and the other's a standard. So what's the difference? This filter here, if you go around and count the folds in the filter element, you'll count 60 folds in there. In this one here, this is a standard filter, there's only 40. So there's 50% more filtration capacity or filtration material in this filter than this one. Now they're both fine to use, and I use these filters based on price mainly, because I'm changing my oil every 6 months. It doesn't really matter whether I'm using a premium or a standard filter. If you're going to change your oil every 12 months, use that one. It's got a lot more filtration capacity and should handle a 12-month oil change interval with ease. If you're changing your oil every 6 months, that one's going to be fine. But yeah, I just buy on price. So I use either AC Delco filters, which I can get off eBay fairly cheap, or Ryco or Westfield filters. I don't use anything else other than those because I know that they're of good quality. Ryco, you see people whinging about Ryco filters. There's nothing wrong with them. They're a great product. Ryco has been making filters for 80 and 90 years. If they were making shit filters, then they wouldn't be around. So there is excellent quality and equivalent to the OEM quality filters. So let's get into it. Right, we're underneath the car. I've got a big sheet of cardboard under here so I don't get oil spilled all over the concrete in the shed. I've grabbed the 15mm socket. The sump plug is on the back of the sump just here. So I've loosened that off. And it's just finger tight in there now, I think. Yep. We've got our oil drain pan underneath, and we're just going to loosen that off. The oil in the sump is obviously still pretty hot. The car's been sitting for about 15 or 20 minutes since we went for a drive, so it's taken the edge off it a little bit. You want the oil hot so it flows out, but obviously there's a risk of burning yourself if it's too hot, so just wait 10 or 15 minutes for it to cool off a tad. Another reason to have your gloves on as well. So we're just going to take the sump plug out now, and hopefully I'll be able to catch the sump plug before I drop it into the oil pan, but 99% of the time I do drop it in there, but we can get that later on. That's coming out slowly there now, and it is pretty effing hot, so need to be careful. Right, so that's draining there. So we'll leave that to drain for about 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll just go to the top of the car and I'll show you a few things up there. Okay, we're at the top of the engine. Hopefully you can see everything that I'm doing here. So we need to remove the top cover of the engine so we can get to the oil filter, which is under this housing here. So we take out or take off the oil filler cap. That just unscrews, pops off like that. You also see that they have the specification of the oil rated for the engine written on the oil filler cap as well. So the plastic cover just pops off. And now you have access to the oil filter housing just here. Make sure you put the oil filler cap back in at this stage, because we don't want anything falling down inside the engine, because that'll be shit. I told a lie, it's not a 32mm socket. I'll just go grab the right one. Okay, so that's 27mm. Just loosen that off. Okay, so that's loosened right off there now. That's pretty hot. I'll just grab a rag. There's still plenty of oil left in this filter, so I just like to just pop it out and then just sit it loosely inside the housing so any excess oil can drain out. You can pull it out straight away, but you're going to get oil everywhere, so it's a pain in the ass to clean up. So just loosen it off, let it sit there for a while until all the oil drains out of the filter, and then you can throw it in a bucket and start changing that over. Okay, we'll be back. Righto, so we're ready to change the urethane washer on the sump plug. So you can just see it sitting in there. So you just grab your screwdriver and just prise that out of there. That should come off pretty easily. Grab your new one and chuck that on, and just wipe that down with a bit of paper towel before you screw it back in, but that's ready to go. Next bit is the oil filter. So that just sits in the housing like that. You can just attaches with a clip, you'll see on the bottom of that filter there. So that just pops out like that, and just chuck that in the bucket there. You'll see that there's a seal that you need to replace there, so just prise that out with a screwdriver as well. Chuck that in there, grab your new one and throw that on. While the filter housing's out of the engine, I've just put the bit of rag that I showed you at the start of the video. That's covering the hole where this thing goes, so nothing falls in there, because that'll be crap as well. So this just slides into filter there like that. I'll clean all of that up with degreaser before I put it back in the engine, and before I actually screw the housing back into the engine, I'll run some oil around that seal just so it's lubricated, so we don't pinch it when we're screwing the housing back in, because yeah, you don't want to damage that seal, otherwise you're going to end up with oil everywhere. So make sure you lubricate that up with plenty of oil so it just slides in and doesn't bind on the way in. Okay, so all we need to do is grab our new filter, and you can see down the bottom there, it just pops into those clips at the bottom of the housing like that, and that's ready to go. But yeah, I'll just clean this up. I'll take that filter out and clean it up first, and then put that housing back in. Righto, we'll be back in a sec. Okay, we're ready to get things back together and start getting oil back into this thing. Okay, so the sump's been draining for about 15 minutes. It's slowed to a drip. You're never ever going to get all the oil out of it, so once you left it for about 15 or 20 minutes, you can put the sump plug back in. So I'll just clean that up with a bit of paper towel and get the sump plug back in there. Right, sump plug. Always put it in and tighten it up as far as you can by hand. Never start it off with a socket, because if you cross thread it, then you're gonna have a bad day. You fucked it basically, and yeah, that's probably not a job that you're going to be able to fix at home. So hand tighten it all the way up as far as you can. I'll just move the oil pan out of the way, and then finish it off with a socket. They need to be tight, but not over tight. So just make sure that when you do it up, it's firm. You don't want to be swinging off it, because yeah, once again, if you strip the thread on the sump plug, it's not going to be good. So I'm just tightening that up so that's tight there, and I'll just go a little bit further, and that's it. So yeah, doesn't need to be super tight. It's not going to go anywhere, and that urethane washer will bind, and I believe that they expand a little bit, so that'll help hold it in. But yeah, it's not a moving part, so it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so we've sealed up the sump. Now it's time to install the filter and get some oil back in the car. Okay, on the top of the engine, I'll just show you. So that's the oil filter housing there, and your cartridge oil filter just gets screwed straight back into there. Okay, so yeah, as I said before you screw this thing back in, run some oil around that seal there, so that's lubricated and it doesn't bind and break or split when you're tightening this housing back down. Righto, one other thing that I like to do is pour some oil into that filter so it gets primed up. Like, that's completely dry at the moment, so if we pour oil in there, it's going to be wet, and oil is going to flow past that filter a lot faster when we first start the car up than it would if it was dry. So we'll just do that. Hopefully won't make too much of a mess. do that over the top of the filler there. Just give that a few seconds to soak through. Yeah, you can see, I don't know whether you can see that, but there's oil swishing around inside there now, so that's all good. Pour that in. Get a bit of oil and run around that seal. So that will be all ready to go. I want to slot that back in, which we'll do right now. Just the rest of that in there. So that's our 0.4. So remember I said it takes 5.4 litres. So we've got our 0.4 in there. We just need to get the other 5 in. We'll just tighten up our oil filter housing. Okay, so that's tightened up all the way, and we can get the rest of our oil in there now. Just pause for a second. Righto, so we've got all the oil back in the car. Now we can just put the engine cover back on and put the oil filler cap back on as well. And we're done. So next part of the operation is to reset the oil life indicator inside the car. So I'll show you that. Okay, we're inside the car and we're going to set the oil life indicator back to 0. So you turn the car on, but don't start it. And you'll get to, if you just press the menu button on your indicator stalk down there, and go to the vehicle information menu, and you'll see that oil life remaining is at 56%. So just press the set clear button on the end of the indicator stalk to reset that. Oh, you want to sure you want to reset it? Yes, we are. So now we've got 100% oil life remaining. Turn the vehicle off. Turn it back on and just check to see if that's reset back to 100%. Menu again, vehicle information, oil life is at 100%, so we're all set. The only other thing you need to do is to change your, you can't really see that because of the light, but yeah, just change your service sticker over to a new one and set it at whatever interval that you're going to service your car at, so 6 months, 12 months, or if you're doing a lot of kilometres, at whatever kilometres, up to a maximum of 15,000 kilometres if you're using fully synthetic motor oil. So we'll start the car and just make sure that we don't have any oil leaks. I shouldn't. So yeah, so just run the car for a little while, check for any oil leaks, make sure that everything, your sump plug's tightened up and you've got the oil filler cap back in properly. Just check for oil leaks around the oil filter housing. I've never had any before, so yeah, if you've tightened that up the way you should, and the yeah, you shouldn't have any problems there. And go for a short drive, come back, let the car sit overnight, and then just check your oil level. As I said, these cars take 5.4 litres with a filter change, so if you're putting 5.4 back in, you'll be right. So, and that's pretty much it, I think. So yeah, thank you.